You're listening to Build Your Happier Marriage podcast, where we help Christian wives of entrepreneurial husbands build happier marriages without compromising their faith or sacrificing their personal growth. Today's episode is what to do when feeling like a single parent and how to reconnect with your spouse. We'll get to that right after this.
Hello and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Imagine this. You're juggling work, kids, meals, laundry. The list goes on. And you're feeling like you're running on fumes, and your husband seems like a distant roommate. You crave connection, but where do you even begin? A study shows that couples who feel disconnected from their spouse experience higher levels of loneliness, depression, and marital dissatisfaction. And you might be raising your hand and said, all three, and possibly more as well. And I can just imagine what that is like for you. Here's a quote that I think is very fitting by Mignon McLaughlin, who says, "A successful marriage requires falling in love many times, always with the same person." This is something you are longing for, the feeling of what it is to fall in love over again. It's something that it seems so distant for you. It seems like this is not what it is you are experiencing, because being loved and feeling cared for is like for you now a distant memory, right? And no matter how much you've tried, very little seemed to work. And you're almost tired of or fatigued or just kind of checked out to some degree emotionally and mentally. Or in other words, you have also kind of to protect yourself and keep your sanity. You may have done certain things that really it's a matter of survival. Now, sometimes you do experience that seemingly a spark that really feel like, oh, here we go. It seems like we're getting there. But sometimes it does not last but for a short time. And this is where the disappointment comes in. And now you're wondering, will it ever happen? You're experiencing the distancing that is taking place in your marriage, and you don't like it, right? The sad part, it doesn't seem like your husband feels the same way. But when you ask him, he looks at you with the, I can't believe you would even ask that stare, right? He may even just kind of walk away, ignore you, dismiss that, because in his mind, how could you ever say something like that? And he's just taking it for granted that it should always be the way it is, even though he's busy spending most of his free time working on the business. Because in his mind, he's doing that for you and him and the family. And somehow when he hears that from you, he's thinking, I can't believe her. I just can't believe her. She's thinking that and saying that. And maybe he's acting in a way that makes you like the bad guy just because you're trying to connect with him. And that only adds to the layer of experience, of emotions that you've been having. And so even you're trying and, trying to get him to somehow see where you're coming from, it's not worked so far. So what do you do? Okay. Well, this and more is what we are going to unpack in this episode, and we'll do that right after this.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when You feel like you've tried everything. Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
So, what do you do when you're feeling like a single parent? And how do you reconnect with your husband, especially when you're feeling exhausted, frustrated, resentful, or lonely? Or maybe all of the above, you might say. What you are feeling is not unique to you. And I want to emphasize that. Now, it's not to excuse what has happened or is happening, but I want to let you know you're not the only one who is experiencing this. I am speaking from both personal and professional experience, right? So that I can assure you of, which I've heard hundreds, if not thousands of stories over the almost 2 decades of doing the work of a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified relationship coach. As you can imagine, I've heard stories like this over and over again. So when I say it's not unique, it's not to dismiss or minimize your experience. It's real for you, and your experience is your experience. And I want to make sure that you hear that. But I can also say that from my own personal experience in marriage and being an entrepreneur like your husband, with a wife who've gone through some of what you're experiencing, I've experienced it firsthand. And if you ask my wife, she might tell you that she relates to some of what you're going through because she has lived that. I thank God we've gotten a whole lot better. As time has gone by, the years have gone by, as of this year, basically this recording, we've been married for 39 years. That's a long time, wouldn't you say? So we've all been there to some degree. Now, it's not, again, to minimize or dismiss or reduce what it is you're experiencing because, again, it's real to you. And I want to speak to that. I don't want to somehow make you feel like you should just kind of, okay, because other wives have experienced that means I should just kind of, roll up and just ignore it. No. I'm not saying that. I just want you to know that you're not the only one who have gone through that. And I have helped many, many wives like yourself. And I hopefully, as you listen to this podcast episode today, you will see, or at least have a glimmer of hope, a little light shining through the dark place you might be right now. And so I want you to hear that. Now, life gets busy. I don't have to say that to you. I don't have to remind you about that because you know that firsthand. Children demanding attention and communication falls by the wayside. And you're like, what we said earlier, feeling like a single parent, managing the household solo, this is your story. This can be incredibly discouraging, and I'm not going to in any way sugarcoat that. Yes, I empathize with that, and I can't imagine for you how discouraging that must be. And like I've said, it also leads to feelings of resentment towards your husband. That is one of the things I hear so often when I work with my clients. Not all, but those who come in to talk about issues like this. That's what they'll tell me. And I will ask the question if they haven't brought it up. I'll say, hey, so what I'm hearing is there's some resentment there. And I can tell you time and time again, without exception, maybe on one hand, almost every wife that has presented like you have in this manner will say, yes, I'm feeling resentful and even feeling bitter. I'm feeling bitter that this is going on. But I want to remind you of how important it is to somehow get this ship upright, get this ship on the right course, because it's important that you and your husband be on the same page, pulling together. Now, it doesn't mean you're doing the same things, obviously, but it might be every now and then be doing some things together that you both like, and we'll get to that. But I want to bring back this whole idea of how important it is to feel like you're on the same page and on the same team, because that's what tend to be disruptive, because you feel as if you're pulling in different directions. And Ecclesiastes 4 verse 9 is a good reminder of this, where the scripture says, two are better than one, because they have a good return for their work. Two are better. So it's important that you and your husband find a way to get on the same page. Now, it may look different from what I'll share in this episode, but see if you can pick up a few things that would help you and your husband to try as best as possible to be on the same page. Now, I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's challenging sometimes, because I know for me as a husband and as the one who's pursuing building out the business for my family and wanting my family to experience, wonderful things and not lacking anything, I can tell you from firsthand experience that it's challenging, because sometimes I assume that my wife and I are on the same page concerning how I'm using my time, where when I'm away or not available, and I'm just kind of hoping that she can read my mind. And can I tell you, that very rarely happens. And I just go by my assumption, and then I find out later that it wasn't the way that I was thinking. And I'm thinking, man, I missed that one. And so I find that it requires work, and it's challenging to get on the same page. Now, again, it's not to be the same, not to always do the same thing. It's really in a way that is complementary. So same page is simply complementary. I've used soccer illustration in the past, and what I realized that every one of us on the team, when I used to play soccer, and I used to play in the defense most times, but sometimes I've played in the middle or on the front line, or in the forward, we would say in soccer. And what happened is, when I'm playing out there, and if I'm assigned a role, I'm not playing the same role as everybody else, right? The other 9 players on the field, and so including myself, 10 players including myself. So the other 9 players, they all have different roles to play. And all of us better be playing our role if we're going to succeed as a team. And what I find is that we need to communicate. We need to make certain that we don't get in another person's lane, but we are supporting, we are complementing for the team to win. So finding your way back into feeling like a team and like you are on the same page with your husband has to be a priority. And I'm sure you would agree with that. As a matter of fact, you're listening because you believe it is a priority, and you're thinking your husband is the one who possibly, the way he's acting, would not communicate as if for him it is a priority. And maybe that might be true in your case, but I can tell you from a husband's perspective, and one like your husband, I can tell you in my heart it's a priority. If you ask me, I'll tell you, of course, I would say family, our children, running the household, getting things in a certain way is a priority. But sometimes from my own action, you would not believe that, because I'm so focused on what it is I'm doing that sometimes I forget time. Sometimes when I'm in my sweet spot and in my zone, man, I'm just sitting there and I'm getting things done. And before I know it, it's late, So I become oblivious of what's going on sometimes. And many times I close my door in my office and, lock myself away and somehow shut myself away from whatever is happening in the house so I can get the things done. And in my mind, by doing that, I am doing it for the family, right? It's always, and it's not an excuse. It's not like we're making this up. It's true. I cannot tell you how desperate I am when I'm working on those things to get it done so I can get to be with my wife. And then when my kids were much younger, now they're much older now, they don't nearly need me as they did before, but it is something that I know I lacked in the early stages of our relationship, our marriage. Now, there is a reason that God had put you guys together. And with his help, you can once again feel like you are on a team where 2 are better than 1. Now, again, as I said, I know it's not easy, but it is possible. because nothing is impossible for those who believe. The scripture alludes to that, or said that in Mark chapter 9, verse 23, where Jesus said to the man who was asking him question about can he do certain things. And Jesus says, as far as possibilities go, everything is possible for the person who believes. And I would say the question is, if you are a believer, if you're not, you want to become one. But as a believer, you're going to take Jesus at his word, where he said everything is possible for the person who believes. So it's important that you get on the believing side and see this through, where God have said he is going to help you to make this possible to get back where you once were. Now, you have to believe, right? You too have to believe that as Jesus challenged the man who came to him for help, you have to believe as well that it's going to start there. It's going to start there because Jesus have made the promise, and he's the same. God is no respecter of persons. He is not just for the one and then not for the other. Now, so it's important then to recognize there is good news. And I hope you're hearing me kind of get into that place. You don't have to settle for this. This doesn't have to be your ongoing story. It can change. So rekindling that spark that you're looking for and reconnecting with your husband is absolutely possible. If it was not, I would not be telling you that. And one of the things I tell my clients who've come to see me, and when they're saying, man, maybe we're too far gone and it's too late, I said, you're here. The reason why you're here, or the very fact that you're here, tells me you do believe there's possible hope. Now, I know some people sometimes want to come and will say, hey, see, I tried it. It never worked. And they just want to give one more reason to say it never worked. But I find that if both people who come to me, say you and your husband, I believe you're there because you truly want this to work. You want this to work. Now, there are exceptions. I do know there are exceptions where one person comes believing and want it to work, and the other person have already checked out and truly could not really care. And it's not hard to tell when that is happening. Now, I've worked with so many clients over the last almost 2 decades, and sometimes when I share stories or talk about something in my episode in this podcast, if you're listening and maybe you are one of my clients at some point, you might think, well, oh, he's talking about my situation. Listen, I can tell you this. I have no one particular in mind when I go through these episodes, because I've heard one story, I've heard it a second time and a third time. I cannot tell you, when I say 95% or more of the issues that I work with in my clients, they present with the issue of communication. That's what they start with. And then they go into what really is going on in the relationship. So when I talk about these examples or give something that sounds a certain way, it's because I hear it hundreds and hundreds of times in different ways. Maybe not the same wording, but it basically comes down to that very thing. So when I talk about this, you will know that because I'm really giving it more of a generalized kind of feedback here, or I wouldn't say advice, but kind of helping you through your own issues. I want you to take this at face value and with an unbiased way of thinking, because this is coming from my own experience. Many of it, I can tell you, after 39 years, I have a lot of stories to tell. So in my own personal journey, but also because I've worked with people like yourself, and these are things I hear quite often. So I'm going to speak in general here, but I have had clients many times, and some of them have come in, like I mentioned, who feel like they're the single parent. And many times they will talk about how they barely are speaking, right? They barely are speaking, let alone having meaningful conversations. And what I find myself doing is working with them on simple communication strategies, like scheduling regular date nights and have conversations. And this is a shameless plug, but I've created myself a card deck that is, I'm trying to get that now in Amazon. So maybe at some point you can also look into that if this intrigues you. But this deck of cards is to simply help couples have conversations around topics that they might not want to bring up normally. And the way the questions are worded, it gives each person a chance to listen and to speak and then to take away something from that. So on a date night, it could be used, or you could find some other ways to kind of get communication going, because this is an area that many don't do well at all. And those date nights could be going out of the house. It could be done at the home. Even if it's just 30 minutes after the kids goes to bed. So it may be, if you have small kids and they're in bed, then you could take 30 minutes or so just to kind of connect. Or maybe if you can, which is my preferred suggestion, is you and your husband take some time once per week to do something together, just to kind of get yourself out of the surroundings. And I know sometimes a change of space, that you are where you are, a change of space leads to a change of state of mind. So sometimes the relationship is looking for that. So what I find is that when I share these things, I also encourage them to prioritize each other, right? It could be some small gestures of affection. Maybe it's a small gift. It could be a quick hug. It could be handwritten notes. It could be just something that your spouse would like and would take notice of. Now, these small steps, along with open communication, can lead to a big difference in your marriage. I know it firsthand, and I've seen it also in the work that I have done. George Bernard Shaw have a very famous quote that I think you may have heard before. If not, I think you will find it very intriguing, where he says, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." Imagine that, right? So many times people will say, "Oh, we communicate." And when I'm working with clients sometimes, and I hear them say that, and I ask them, "Tell me more about that. What does that look like?" And when I'm hearing, they're saying that we talk a lot. We talk a lot. And sometimes they talk in a way where one person outdo the other. And they're saying, "Oh, we're communicating." No, that's not communication. It's a part of it, but that's not effective. Let's put that word there. It's not effective communication. And if you're going to have effective communication, it requires a better skills than those that you might be experiencing. So here are some practical steps to reconnect with your husband. And I kind of alluded to that when I said schedule, get dedicated time together. Even 15 minutes of quality conversation can make a big difference. Proverbs 15 verse 22 says, "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed." You see how important that is? Because if you're going to succeed at something, it's important that both of you have a say in what's going on, in the planning and strategizing for the family, so that it prevents many times this conflict you're experiencing. Secondly, focus on active listening. Put away distractions and truly hear what your spouse is saying. I cannot tell you how I've seen, my wife and I will go out on a date sometimes, and to certain places we go, and I look around the restaurant, for example, and I'll see a couple sitting down, and they have almost finished eating. And even when they're eating, the phone is right there in one hand. They're eating, and the phone is right there in the other hand. And I'm thinking, like, man, they can't do just one thing by eating just now and let the phone sit down. No, the phone is right there. And as soon as they're finished eating, and I hope this is not you, they're on their phones. And I'm sitting there sitting down from across from each other, or side by side, and the phone is where they're glued to. No conversations, no kind of body language, looking into each other's eyes, and none of that. They're on their phones. And I'm thinking, wow. So that's not active listening to the other person speaking when you are distracted. I cannot tell you how many times people will say, "Oh, I listened to her, I listened to him," and I'm asking the question, and the person may say, "No, you don't, because when I'm speaking to you, you're on your phone, you're texting, or you're on social media." And I would agree with that party who says they're not listening, because that's not active listening. That's not effective. That is just hearing, And there's a difference between hearing and listening, wouldn't you say? So the third thing I want to suggest now is express appreciation. I cannot tell you how important a simple thank you or a compliment, how far that can go. It can go a long way when there is something like a thank you. I have made note of this sometimes when I've gone out with my wife and maybe sometimes another couple or with friends. And we all sit at the table and I'm just watching sometimes. I love to kind of watch people, That's one thing I do is people watch many times. You may do that, I don't know. But I know that I will watch and see how the interaction, not only between couples, but also when the person who's the server. And they'll bring the food or the water and the person sitting there just keep on talking. No acknowledgement, no thank you. None of that. I'm saying so many times I just say thank you just in general for everyone at the table sometimes, because I think that's the least we can do is say thank you for something that the person didn't have to do. So maybe you might say, why would I say thank you to my husband? Or why would I say thank you to my wife? Well, because it's the right thing to do. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't take your spouse for granted. That's the point here. So a compliment and appreciation, let them know how much you appreciate their hard work. Because if the only time your husband hears from you, or you husband, if you're listening, the only time your wife hears from you is when you have a complaint, is when you are criticizing something. That cannot be healthy if all that goes in are negative things. There has to be a positive piece that's also put inside the conversation. The fourth thing I want to mention is this. You may want to engage in shared activities. So you could find something you both enjoy doing, right? Maybe you might have one thing you both enjoy doing, whatever that might look like, whether it's a hobby, watching a movie, or taking a walk together. And one of the things that I know for us, what we do is every now and then we may be watching a series on TV somewhere. And I don't watch much television, neither does my wife. We do from time to time. But we will be watching a series and, on the weekend, we'll play catch up. So we'll kind of sit down and begin to watch. And when that series doesn't show up, I think, oh man, because it's our time to connect. It's our time just to kind of, watch something together we both like. And so we have a few things we do like to do together. And many things she does or I do, we just really enjoy it ourselves, which is fine. But you want to find something, a shared activity that you both can do together and enjoy together. And I cannot emphasize this last one here, and that is pray together and seek God's guidance. I cannot emphasize how important this one is. And Philippians 4 verse 13, where the scripture says, I can do all things through him or through Christ who strengthens me. All things. Jesus will help you through because he wants nothing more than you to succeed. Jody Picoult have this quote where it goes like this: small things become big things when you care. Small things become big things when you care. So I want to encourage you to keep the faith in your marriage. Marriage is a journey, and sometimes, I was going to say sometimes it takes work. Yes, I would just go on record by saying it always takes a lot of work. Every single day you should be working on your marriage, working in it and on it. And remember that God is always with you. So lean on him for strength and guidance as you reconnect with your husband. It's very, very important to remind yourself of that, because God is a force and a strength and a person that you can depend on. He's faithful and he wants the best for you. So I would encourage you to do that. I want to also bring your attention to, I have put together 11 rules for happier marriage. And it's a PDF, and you can have that free for the asking. Now, I have also coming up a program, Build Your Happier Marriage. Happier Marriage by Design. Happier Marriage by Design is a program that I have coming up. And I want to put you on a waiting list that I'm kind of curating right now. And I see those who are qualified. I want to take a small group of spouses through this program, Happier Marriage by Design. And if you're interested in that, you will also get this 11 Rules PDF simply by the asking. If you go to Build Your Happier Marriage, buildyourhappiermarriage.com/waitlist, you can have that, sign up and get on the waiting list. Now, it's important that you do that if you want to get that free download. Now, if you said, you know what, I'm not interested in working on my relationship in a context that others are, or I'm not really interested in seeing how I can find the strategies to design my marriage to become more happier. You just want to get the download of the 11 rules for a happier marriage. Well, that's available as well. And you can go to buildyourhappiermarriage.com/rules, and you can get it there as well. So that's if your choice. But I would suggest you try to get in on the wait list. And once we cut that off, then nobody else can get on the wait list until we bring it up at some other time in the future. And some things will change the second time and third time around, of course. So I want to encourage you to do that. The links will be in the notes following this episode. So with show notes, you'll find the links there that you can click on and take you right to that page. And you can just download the PDF and get that right away in your mailbox. So my friend, I want to say thank you for taking the time to listen. We've come to the end of another exciting episode, and I hope you found much value in it, and I hope that you related to some things. So I'd encourage you to take this and re-listen if you have to. If you're listening and your husband hasn't listened, or you're listening and your wife have not listened, why not encourage them to listen and just talk about some things that were said? You can either, counter and talk about it from a perspective in your own context, and that's fine. But I want to encourage you, though, to listen if you have to, and discuss it. Maybe it might serve as a springboard into other conversations. And can I also ask you to share this with at least one other person? I would truly appreciate that. And my friend, may God bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. And may he bless your marriage in a manner that will blow your way, because God is able to do that. And that's my prayer for you and your husband today. God bless, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast as well. God bless.